Hello and welcome to Lowestoft Town Council Watch Spooky Goings On. Very appropriate for Halloween, I think. This one is a bit of a mystery tale. I've been going back through some of the old records and, do you remember at one of the meetings recently they were very concerned because things apparently had gone missing and they were a bit worried about the volunteers at the new town hall project possibly nicking the artefacts. Well, this rang a vague bell in the grey cells, so I thought I'd just try and refresh my memory. And there's some very spooky things going on. The idea of people nicking the stuff is actually not quite a new thing. Do you remember, they were obviously concerned, one of the council officers mentioned about, it was important to DBS check people because, they might be dodgy and might nick some of the artefacts. Well, going back through the available paperwork, nicking the artefacts is actually not a new thing. There was actually some of the old town hall artefacts went missing. What this means is Lowestoft's sort of rather keen approach to confidentiality can be sort of exploited a bit. Well, there are some very hard and fast rules on what constitute matters that let them announce that the next section of the meeting is going to be sort of secret and they can talk about what they like there. And what seems to happen is that not only do they talk about the things like staff considerations, so if they're going to talk about pensions or sickness or absence or people doing things they shouldn't have done, then they are allowed to talk about that in confidence. And I think that's fair dues. I mean, we don't seem to actually have a human resources department who would normally be the secret squirrels of any organisation. We have the weird circumstances where sometimes the councillors need to talk about the staff and the staff run the meetings, so the staff have to leave. And once the staff have left, it's up to councillors to keep the records of what they talked about and distribute them in secret, which doesn't really inspire confidence, does it, with some of the people that we see either contributing or not contributing in the meetings. So realistically, it would appear that at some stage there was some artefacts went missing. And eventually it actually was reported to the police, and in the public sessions it was reported in one that the police were investigating. Now, the very common occurrence is that once a touchy subject has been aired, they try not to talk about it again. So it's very rare for it sort of to be revisited because clearly once they're in confidential session and the councillors can say what they like, very often they keep things to themselves. So my guess is, and it's only a guess, is that when things look a little bit awkward, it's probably best in the confidential sessions to actually not bring it up again, so we don't know about it in the public sessions. So some artefacts went missing. What were they? Don't know. We have to assume they were sort of older artefacts. I mean, presumably if they were modern things, like someone's nicked a computer, well then the police would be involved in that, wouldn't they? But the police were apparently involved in whatever artefacts were stolen, misplaced, lost, just gone missing. We don't know what they were. We don't know if there was an outcome. We don't know if the artefacts were returned. I mean, we've actually got an assets register where presumably all this stuff is listed. And at some point, someone sort of did a stock take and noticed that things were missing. And clearly we don't want that to happen again. So hence, let's get some volunteers in and DBS the hell out of them and make sure they're not going to nick the stuff, which of course DBS check wouldn't reveal anyway, would it? But there we go. That seems to be the way it is. But so I wonder, we've lost some artefacts. They've gone missing. Did they ever reappear? What were they? Were they trivial little things, or were they things like mayoral robes, or did we have any sort of regalia? Maybe we had a solid gold chain and it vanished and we've now got a Chinese cheap copy and no one's noticed. I'm making this stuff up. It's not serious. But realistically, something was nicked. The police were involved and nobody ever spoke about it again. And that's not really very good. We've also had other things that sort of maybe haven't been stolen because perhaps they haven't been purchased, or perhaps they have. As in, remember the meeting when we were talking about the Battle of Lowestoft? And everybody was getting quite excited about buying the painting for the town hall. The rather nice galleon-filled sea scene of the Battle of Lowestoft, with cannons firing and blue skies and sails furling away. We were going to buy that. And then at one meeting, somebody mentioned, were we sure that that picture that we were about to spend a lot of ratepayers' money on was actually genuine? Because someone had noticed that it was the same picture that had a different title. So it was no doubt galleons firing their cannons at each other, but was it the Battle of Lowestoft? And that one went very quiet too. So was that painting ever bought? If so, can we have a look at it? Or did we discover that in actual fact there was some skullduggery going on? It's getting on for Halloween, isn't it? So we've lost artefacts. We're worried about losing other artefacts. We nearly bought an artefact, and then presumably we didn't buy it. Or did we? Have we bought it and secreted it away? The town hall gear apparently is in some damp old container lockup. But, that seems a funny place to keep your artefacts if you're trying to look after them. But there we go. But let's move on a little bit. So we've lost some artefacts. They've gone missing. You may have also picked up from the start of almost every meeting that Wendy Brooks keeps asking a question that she's not allowed to ask. At the start of every meeting, they read out the apologies for absence. And usually there's 3 or 4 councillors who can't make it. Or sometimes there's so many councillors who can't make it that they have to abandon the meeting. But the one I'm talking about is where they have a list of councillors, all with reasons given. So basically, somebody tells the council officers they can't make the meeting, and that's then recorded as a reason given. Wendy keeps bringing up the minutes when Councillor Colby is absent. Well, Councillor Colby appears to be permanently absent. So he's gone missing. Now, we know from a couple of meetings where Councillor Pearce has mentioned that Councillor Colby is not well. Now, in actual fact, this isn't a secret because Councillor Colby, in his bio on the council website, actually tells everybody that he is suffering from an illness. The problem is he's suffering from an illness that's so bad that he never turns up to anything. And it does make you wonder, councillors are there to support the people. And if you're not actually capable of turning up to any meetings, not even via Zoom, which would be okay, I guess. But Councillor Colby doesn't turn up. Now, Councillor Brooks, I think, has got a point here, because she's left with a bit of a dilemma. Someone approves the apologies. Somebody then seconds them. And then there's a vote. Well, she's pointing out that not all the councillors turn up. And one councillor, sadly, no doubt due to ill health, can't make any meetings. So she's in the awkward position of feeling that she has to approve the apologies that have been sent in when clearly she doesn't. But there's no option to say, yeah, I understand, Fred's got a bad throat, John's got an infection, Jane's got a waterworks problem, and Councillor Colby has got something that doesn't allow him to come in ever. So she's not allowed to actually vote for that one councillor not being accepted. It's an all or none. So sometimes she votes to approve the apologies, but sometimes I think it sticks in her throat a little bit and she has either to abstain or sometimes actually has to vote against the apologies, meaning she's voting against the councillors who do have reasons for not turning up to the occasional meeting, when one councillor has basically done a runner from the council. So poor old Councillor Colby's clearly not well and cannot come to any meetings and cannot attend remotely, yet he's still a councillor. In the rules, there is a bit about this, and someone's long-term absence has to be approved. Now, no doubt it's approved in one of the secret sessions, presumably the personnel meetings, I don't know, but somewhere along the line, this permanent absence has been approved. So we've lost some artefacts, and we've actually lost a councillor, which is a bit odd, isn't it? How mysterious. But then, not only have we lost a councillor, we've lost the town clerk. Now, the town clerk is probably the council version of the chief executive officer. It's the person who's in charge, the person who's ultimately responsible for everything. And so that's quite a powerful position. Now, years ago in Lowestoft, we actually had a town clerk who was called P.A. Taylor, a fairly scary man from my memory, and his name was on every sign, every prohibition notice, everything, by order, P.A. Taylor. Very powerful man. And we've now got a town clerk who's been missing, certainly since January, February this year. So it's getting on for a year. And our Sarah Foote, who was always in the records as deputy clerk, suddenly changed to acting town clerk. And that's actually in some of the minutes where the staff were all sent out and the councillors decided that Sarah Foote would be the acting town clerk. She seems to have made a pretty good job of it, actually, but that's not what we're talking about here. In the gap between January and February, the title of Sarah Foote's role changed. Nothing seems to have been said about it in the minutes that I can find, which is a little bit strange. You think it's something as sort of disastrous as that, one person being sort of crossed out and another being instigated with an acting title is a bit odd. Now, I mean, usually whenever someone is given the title acting, it's because, in essence, the person who would be the normal incumbent of the position, so in this case, Shona Bendix, who is still listed on the council website as the town clerk, although she seems to have been missing for like 10 months, which is a bit odd, isn't it? The last thing I could track down for Shona was where they were doing sort of staff appraisals, and she was listed as having a staff appraisal due. And that was the last mention of her that I can find in the minutes. Presumably, everything else about why she's missing is gone, and it's in a confidential setting somewhere, which none of us are privy to. So it's a bit careless of the council, really. We've lost some artefacts. We nearly bought something that was potentially not genuine. We've lost a councillor, and we've lost the town clerk. It's a bit odd, isn't it? So, in all the things that we're looking back through the records, from February this year, Sarah Foote is shown as acting town clerk, and nowhere in any of the records that I can find is any mention made of the person who is in charge. The ironic thing about being acting town clerk is that one of the roles that town clerk sort of involved is being the responsible officer. So basically, if it goes sort of badly, the responsible person, I mean, I suppose the one that could be hauled up in front of a judge, would be the acting town clerk. And she's been an acting town clerk for an awful long time. There was a reference I found using Google that Shona Bendix was no longer in post. And I made a note of that. The next day, I couldn't find it again. So at the moment, everything says she still is in post, but she's just permanently missing. It's a bit odd, isn't it? I mean, no doubt there's a reason behind it. We'll never know because it's not going to be made public, because it's one of those presumably human resource type things that even though the council don't have a human resource department, the poor councillors are actually made to sort of work like one sometimes. So they take the simple method and don't tell anybody anything about anything, talk about it in secret session, and us mere mortals just sort of see a name on a website and no trace of the actual person. It's very, very strange. I mean, you would think that after 10 months there would be some kind of notice put out. I mean, she's either coming back and she's long-term sick, or she's not coming back. Or they don't know, haven't made a decision, don't know what to do, panicking, confused, all those things. I mean, us poor mortals have to just read the minutes of meetings, watch the meetings, and decide if we're being told things that we should know. Now, of course, it's not in the public interest. It's also probably private. So there's lots of conjecture. I'm not privy to any of the answers. I really wish I was, though, because it does seem a bit odd that the town clerk is still officially a person who's been missing for 10 months. So she's also got, if you do any form of research, no internet history for 10 months either. She appears to be totally missing from the real world and the cyber world too. So she's missing. Poor old Councillor Colby's missing. Some of the artefacts of mayoral heritage are missing. Possibly there's a criminal out there somewhere who did or did not get caught. Who knows? And we're still looking at volunteers. And I note the little comment recently where we don't have a job specification. We don't have a sort of anything official. We sort of have a person profile. So you're looking for a volunteer who's able to do this, that and the other. And the thing that everybody seems to have forgotten about is, along with the job role comes an element of responsibility. And clearly we're not very good at divvying up responsibility. So I think perhaps it might be nice to put in a written request. I'm getting really, really busy, so the next couple of months for me is completely chaotic. So I might not have a chance till the new year, but then that will be coming around for a year since the old chief exec town clerk has vanished. So maybe I'll do it then. But I figured that in every meeting, probably something like full council, there's a bit where members of the public are allowed to ask questions, which is a very rare thing. But I think a formal question asking, what happened to the painting idea? Did we buy it? What's happened to the person who was reported to the police for nicking the artefacts? Did they ever get prosecuted? What were the articles concerned? And of course then, how long are we going to be without Councillor Colby before, for the benefit of the people, we appoint an extra councillor to look after the interests of the people in his area? It's a bit strange, isn't it, that we just have a councillor who's in office who doesn't do anything. I feel generally sorry for him if he's not very well. And Andy Pearce often reports that he's been to see him and things like that. But if he can't do the councillor role, what on earth is he still on the list for? Sending in apologies every meeting. Seems a bit daft. So all in all, it's an interesting one for Halloween, isn't it? Missing things, missing people, missing information. The Secret Squirrel Brigade are hard at it, keeping it nice and quiet from us mere mortals. I'd just love to know what goes on in some of those meetings, because I bet you anything you like, that while the initial idea is one of those approved reasons for being in secret, once they're in secret, they might drop in a few other things, just to let everybody know what's really going on, which of course we're not allowed to know, when sometimes those things may not be conflicts of interest. They might not be to do with money, it might not be to do with contracts, it might not be to do with anything that the secrecy rule allows, but just an update on what's going on. And that should be done in the open meetings, not behind the closed doors of the we're now going to be in secret. Because even if those secret sessions are 100% above board, how do we know? We take the word of the councillors. I think I'd take the word of about half of the councillors, to be honest. Half of them I would believe everything they said, and the other half not quite so, because they seem to enjoy the element of secrecy and the speed at which sometimes things get knocked into secret session is getting faster and faster. It's almost like every time something comes up that's going to be a little bit awkward or a little bit embarrassing, we'll find an excuse and put that in secret. And that's the opinion that I, as a member of the public, get. You know, said it now. Secret session, eh? And they're not particularly secret, to be honest. I mean, I don't know who's in them. I don't know who listens. I don't know what sort of minutes they take. But I bet the records of the secret parts are not quite as comprehensive as the ones that the public get access to. And some of those, quite frankly, bear little resemblance to the conversations that actually go on. And this has been mentioned a couple of times, where the minutes don't seem to quite tally with what actually went on. And that apparently is okay, because the minutes are not verbatim of what was said. They're a general feeling and the trend and direction of a meeting. So it might well say there was some discussion. It doesn't say there was a raging argument. It's interesting. Wendy's objections are always a good one. When she objects to having to approve or sort of object to the apologies for absence, look how that's recorded. It's never quite what we saw. You know, it just says, and there was one abstention or one vote against. It doesn't say quite how annoyed Wendy was when she did that. And yeah, I guess that's how council meeting minutes are done. But it's a bit sly and doesn't really increase our confidence in the council, or, sad to say, the officers, because they tend to go along with it too. And everything is sort of a bit like Sir Humphrey in Yes, Prime Minister. Remember? We're sort of, it does really ring bells of that old programme about how things are actually worded and recorded. And the visual recordings that we've got very often are quite different from what's actually written down on paper. Anyway, that's enough of me rambling for today, because I was just getting a bit confused by all this missing stuff that we never get to know about. Especially that painting. Because if the painting we were about to buy was being flogged to the council as the Battle of Lowestoft and turned out not to be, that's an interesting one, isn't it? And all evidence of that online appears to have vanished. No trace of that painting for sale anymore. So somebody's bought it. See you on the next video. Look after yourselves. Take care.